Hello, my name is Chloe Folan, and you're very welcome to my next video in the playlist Rainbow Bridge Support Community Videos. I've been teaching the Rainbow Bridge techniques, which are also known as the Soul Star Clearing techniques, internationally for many years, well over a decade now. And I've actually been meaning to create these FAQ videos for a while, because as you can imagine, in my capacity as one of the main and most well-known teachers of the Rainbow Bridge techniques, I do get a lot of people emailing me and asking different questions about the Rainbow Bridge techniques, and different, whether it's someone who's read the late founder's books, or whether it's people that have accessed the Rainbow Bridge techniques through the soul1.org website. So again, I've been meaning to create these videos for quite some time, and I have a backlog of videos that I would like to make. But today's video is more aimed at a very simple question or questions, but a very important one. So while this video isn't going to be as in-depth as my initiation explanation videos or my Antakarana thread weaving videos, this question in particular crops up a lot. And even though it seems simple, it is an intricate question, and a question that does need a good answer, especially when helping to guide people through the Rainbow Bridge techniques. And it's questions around sitting, standing, and body positioning when doing the Rainbow Bridge meditation techniques, in particular, the Rainbow Bridge Phase 1 techniques. So I usually get these questions because I address these questions as well in a very in-depth way as part of my online formal classes. So these questions usually crop up and come from people that have either read the late founder's book and have stumbled across my website, or people that have contacted me through the soul1.org website. So that's where I'm going to begin. So for those that didn't know, even though I do give formal classes and very in-depth classes on the Rainbow Bridge techniques and Rainbow Bridge related techniques, the soul1.org website is the main website as an online free resource for the Rainbow Bridge Phase 1 and Phase 2 techniques in particular. So I'm just going to share my screen. Sorry, now 2 moments. And I'm just going to bring up the soul1.org website. So it's usually through the soul1.org website, which is Dr. Ronald Tiggle's website, sponsored by Truth Seekers, where these questions come from. So when you come onto this website, if you click on the Phase 1 techniques, it brings you through different sections for how to start with the Rainbow Bridge Phase 1 techniques. So where these questions usually crop up is when someone is starting with the techniques, meaning you would start with the section building the central channel. Now, as everyone or most people would be aware, the central channel is already in the body, but it is usually very thin and very blocked in different areas, depending on internal and external karmic imbalance present and the current condition of the chakras. So even though it's called building the central channel, I call this healing the central channel, because the central channel is already there between soul star to earth star. It just usually needs deep, precise, methodical unblocking and widening to help the chakras sit into place properly and to stabilize the lower part of the Antakarana bridge. Because as I've stated before in other videos, even when it comes to advancing, building the Rainbow Bridge, you can't advance properly building the Rainbow Bridge or the light body if the lower channel condition is not corrected properly and methodically. And it usually needs more attention than most people realize. So people begin with this section here on the website, and you can see here that Phase 1A involves working with the Soul Star chakra through and at particular points through the central vertical channel and axis. So as people start with this technique and start methodically working with the triangulation technique, that's also called phase 1A, it's usually when people come to the knee point or knee points, the soles of the feet and the earth star, that these particular questions crop up around sitting or standing or what's best. So first of all, before I even get into this part of why these particular questions crop up when working on the lower points with clearing the central channel, first of all, I would like to gently remind people that while the Rainbow Bridge techniques are a meditation technique, and it does work with creative visualization, this technique runs deeper than that. This is a proper technique for clearing karmic imbalance. So because this is deeper than just a meditation technique and deeper than just a visualization technique, based on that alone, I would always recommend that you are either seated or lying down when you do this technique. And to explain this another way, because this is a do-it-yourself karmic clearing technique, each time you work with this technique, no matter what stage you are at with the Rainbow Bridge techniques, this is like giving yourself a very deep healing session. So the same way when you would go for an angelic healing session or an energy healing session, you would never be told to stand up while you have the healing session done for energy healing. For energy healing sessions, you are always either lying down or seated. So please remember that as well. That is the other reason why I recommend that no matter what point you are with the Rainbow Bridge techniques, that you would always be seated or lying down. I would never recommend that you stand up doing this technique like that. I've had people email me and tell me that they'll stand up and lean against a wall doing the technique, because sometimes that helps with the visualization, with the triangulation. But again, you could still do that lying down. I can't stress enough that I wouldn't recommend someone do a technique like this standing or walking. I've also had sometimes people tell me that when they get into a good rhythm with this technique, when they get to know it very well, they'll sometimes do this while they're walking or do it while they're walking their dog. And again, you usually wouldn't, unless it's a walking meditation, you know, a dreamtime walking meditation. I don't recommend that you are walking when you do this technique here. Once again, drawing the analogy of, if you went for an energy healing, you would be lying down or seated. And also, please remember, this is more than a meditation technique. This is more than a visualization technique. So again, even though everyone's always been fine who would maybe stand up and lean against a wall, or fine if they've done the technique while they've been walking, I don't recommend it for the reasons I'm discussing. So now that I have that out the way, to go into this a bit more deeply, when people are initially working on the triangulation technique, the upper points are easier to work on, but it's when we come to the final 3 points that questions around body posture and positioning come up again. So give me 2 moments while I explain this. So the central vertical channel, the part of the central channel that is targeted with phase 1, is the part of the technique from the soul star about 6 inches above the head, right through the body, right down to Earth Star Point. So the final point, which is 6 inches below the feet. So the lower part of the channel, and I'm now going to talk about this as if you were lying down. When you're lying down flat, your soul star would obviously be about 6 inches above your head. The central channel is in front of your spine, running through the body. It exits out of the base chakra in between your legs and runs down in between your legs. So that part of the channel is like having a third leg in between your two legs. And that's what you are targeting with the final 3 points. So you're not targeting your legs or your knees because there are channels in the legs, but that's not what's being referenced here with the initial healing of the central channel. There is a separate technique I teach, which is a Rainbow Bridge related technique for building arm and leg channels. But again, that's not what's being referenced here. We're talking about the central vertical channel or axis. So this is the first thing that people can get confused with. The channel being shown here in the diagram with the initial triangulation again, focus on it this way. Imagine there is a pole, a metal pole running down through your body, you know, like a telephone pole or a pole for traffic lights. Imagine one of those is running down through your body in front of your spine. So the top of the pole, a ball of light 6 inches above your head at the top of the pole, your soul star, a pole running right down through the middle of your body in front of your spine, and that pole exiting out in between your legs, going right down into the Earth Star below your feet. So when you're working on the final 3 points, you're targeting the channel in between the legs. So you'd be bringing the soul star down to be level in between your knees and targeting that portion of the channel. And then same for the soles of the feet point. You would be bringing the soul star down level in between your feet and then up through the channel, the central vertical axis. And then Earth Star point 6 inches below your feet. So for visualization purposes, that is easier to do when you are lying down, because this now brings me to 2 more questions that crop up that feed into this. Meaning, sometimes people would contact me and tell me, and I'm glad they do, that they're having trouble working on the final 3 points because they tell me they're seated in lotus position, meaning they're either sitting cross-legged on the floor or they're sitting in lotus yoga position. And that is why you can have difficulty working on the final 3 points. Because when you sit in lotus yoga position, it shortens the lower part of the channel, meaning the minute you sit down cross-legged on the floor, the channel shortens and the Earth Star comes up to be a little bit below the bottom, you know, about 6 inches below the bottom rather than 6 inches below your feet. So I don't recommend that when you're working on the final 3 points that you are seated in lotus position. You're not going to be able to work on the lower part of the channel properly. Hence why people are contacting me asking why they're finding it a bit difficult to visualize, because you've shortened your channel and you're not able to work on the lower part properly. So when you're working on the final 3 points, please don't sit in lotus position and don't sit cross-legged on the floor. Either lie down flat, horizontally on the floor, or lie down flat on a bed, or you can sit in a Western seat. But if you're going to sit in a Western seat, the channel bends to follow the alignment of your legs. And again, if people are wondering why I know this or why I'm describing this so well, in case like that, if you haven't seen my other videos, I do have very intact inner vision, meaning I'm clairvoyant, and I would be a public vetted reader and assessor for the Rainbow Bridge techniques, meaning people internationally and periodically would contact me for auric checks as they work through the Rainbow Bridge techniques, just to see if they're working with the techniques correctly, what's happening with their evolutionary process, getting some really good feedback on where they would be on the evolutionary pathway and considerations for how to continue enforcing evolution with the Rainbow Bridge techniques, and much more. Very in-depth readings. I might put a link down the bottom of this video for anybody interested. So in other words, when I am looking at someone, when I'm aurically viewing someone who's working with phase 1A, or even just someone sitting in a Western seat. Again, the channel bends to follow the alignment of the legs. So when you're sitting in a Western seat, the central channel is moving down centrally through the middle of the body in front of the spine. But then the channel bends to be in between your thighs and then bends down in between your lower legs, in between the shins, going down into the earth star 6 inches below your feet. So if you're sitting in a Western seat, working on those final 3 points, keep that in mind, that a good visualization is pretend you've got a third leg in between your 2 legs in your seated position. So you'd be targeting in between your knees and then in between your feet. So you'd be moving the soul star up at an angle through the channel. And I just want to see if there's any other questions that crop up around that. Sorry, I do have notes today because, like I said, simple questions, but intricate questions and questions that crop up a lot. And in particular, I've had a wave of people over the last 2 weeks contact me, and people that don't know each other, with, once again, very overlapping questions about sitting, standing, and body position. So 2 moments, please, while I check my notes for the main questions that have been coming through. But I constantly receive these questions. These questions crop up in depth in my classes as well. No, I've addressed not sitting in lotus position. I've addressed not sitting cross-legged. I've addressed recommending lying down flat on the ground, flat on the bed. I've addressed not standing. I've mentioned not walking, doing it. And I've mentioned position considerations when you're sitting in a Western seat. So I do believe that was all the main FAQs that have cropped up in the last 2 weeks alone. So I hope that's been helpful. So what I will do, I will put a link down the bottom of this video to the soul1.org website and a link to where you would start with these techniques, building the central channel, because like that, maybe someone's watching this video who hasn't heard of the Rainbow Bridge techniques before, and now it's piqued your interest because it is a very good technique. It's a flawless technique for unblocking the central channel, clearing blockages out the channel. And more to the point, and I might put up a post on my social media about this, I did last year. It's also very important for people to realize that there are people out there that have plagiarized this technique, like that it was kept private and worked with in prototype groups for quite a number of years. So it wasn't known about. It was tested for over 10 years before phase 1 was released. And then phase 2, which overlapped being tested with that, was released about 5-6 years later, after the 10-year mark of phase 1 being released. So these techniques were methodically tested and still are methodically tested and independently verified. But when they were publicly released, meaning the late founders Josephine and Norman Stevens published 3 books. One of them is now available for free on enlighten.org. I better put the link to that as well if people want to actually reference the founder's book. But it was when the information started to become publicly available that it started getting plagiarized and copied. And I've actually lost count of the amount of people that have actually come to me and found this website and realized they've probably come across a technique that copied this one and didn't do for them what this technique actually does. Meaning, please do keep that in mind, that when people do things like that, when they attempt to copy and plagiarize such a high caliber technique, they will never manage to copy and plagiarize it, meaning the results will never be as good as the original because of the intent behind it. Meaning when you do something like that, it does taint your work. So maybe that's also another video I should highlight, over people being aware that, number one, phase 1 and phase 2 of these techniques and some of the Rainbow Bridge related techniques are available for free. And also pointing out to people that if you've come across a technique that is not as old as this one, meaning there's proof over how long this technique has been around, and you've come across something similar, there's a possibility it was copied, from the freely available information and not referenced appropriately. I'll say it again, there have been cases of this technique getting plagiarized, unfortunately, and there's no need. It's a very good technique, it's extremely good, and rather than plagiarizing it, more people should support it rather than plagiarize it. More to the point, people will work it out. It always becomes evident. Authors always get found out when they plagiarize work like this. So on that note, if you're new to these techniques, please feel free to have a look at the website. Please feel free to have a look at the steps. This technique is meant to be a do-it-yourself technique because that also helps with how karmic imbalance is deeply healed and resolved, because it is a do-it-yourself technique. You're taking your power back. You're reclaiming your power for your own healing process and evolutionary enforcement process. It's a phenomenal solo technique to explore. On that note, though, there are people that do like to have proper formal classes. And as I mentioned, I am one of the proper teachers of the Rainbow Bridge techniques, meaning I've got a proper vetted connection to the techniques. So if you would like to do a formal class with me, I do ask for a very reasonable small energy exchange. And I do have a Rainbow Bridge Phase 1 technique class coming up soon. Sorry, I'll just switch to my website. If you want to jump onto my website, www.chloefolan.com. And if you click on the blog section of my website, and if you come down to where I have my Rainbow Bridge Phase 1 technique class highlighted, this year, I will only be offering one more formal Rainbow Bridge Phase 1 technique class, and it will be 4 Zoom classes. So in other words, because I go very in-depth with the Rainbow Bridge techniques, I do more than just teach the steps. I go very in-depth with explanations and suggestions for how to work with other prayers and mantras that you're taught. So if you would prefer a more tutor-led approach to being taught these techniques, starting in July, these will be my last Rainbow Bridge Phase 1 techniques for July, meaning because of the other workshops I teach and the other service offerings that I give, I'm not going to be available to teach Phase 1 formal classes again until 2025. So people will need to wait until 2025 if you do want a formal class with me. So my final Rainbow Bridge Phase 1 class offerings are being taught over 4 2-hour Zoom classes. And the classes are starting in July. One class is in July, and then the other class is in early August. And then the final 2 classes, the third one is in October, the fourth one is in November. And the reason for them being spaced out in the first 2 classes, I go very in-depth with Rainbow Bridge Phase 1A and Phase 1A related techniques, and you do get a fully illustrated, newly edited support technique manual, along with the Zoom class and class recordings. And the class recordings are only given to participants and those that sign up, therefore class attendees only. So in the first 2 classes, I go very in-depth with Rainbow Bridge Phase 1A. I also teach a technique for starting to perceive your own central channel. People really enjoy that because it helps you then validate what these techniques do and do for you, meaning a way you can assess what these techniques are doing for you and where you will receive the most healing. And then there is a gap between the second and third class because you are then encouraged to start into Phase 1A. And it does take around 11 to 13 weeks to complete Phase 1A. So the idea is that by the time it comes up to the third class in October, you would nearly be finished Phase 1A, because I then teach Phase 1B, the widening technique. And I also teach the daily centering and aligning technique, and 2 powerful invocations for how to keep working with your light body, for where you've built your light body to. So this is a phenomenal technique for removing stubborn blockages and calcification from the central vertical channel. It clears the pranic tube. It helps properly align the chakras along the spine, as well as many other benefits. Because of this way, this technique properly and holistically builds you to your triad chakra. That deeply links you with your council of light and hierarchy. So being able to channel very clear messages from your guides and your light council, among many other benefits. So if you would like to do a formal tutoring class with me, please do let me know soon, because you are encouraged to sign up and register early, because when you do register, you are sent an introduction video along with 3 recordings. You're sent an introduction video along with 3 meditations to start with, to start cleansing and preparing the bodies before the first class. And a lot of people that sign up for my classes and sign up early to practice those techniques before the first class always get back to me and say that that alone was magic for them. Meaning absolutely loving the introduction video, really enjoying the introduction meditation techniques to prepare cleansing the auric field and the bodies, meaning the auric bodies, the physical, emotional, and mental bodies. People get huge benefits from the preparation work you're encouraged to do. So this class is nearly fully booked. I only take a limited number of people so I can work with people properly, and so people can get the appropriate attention that's needed, meaning I do deliberately keep my classes small so I can give proper attention to everybody in the class, and also so no one feels like just a number. I don't crowd hoard on my classes deliberately. I keep my classes small. So if you would like to join, please do contact me through my website, www.chloefollen.com, and let me know if there's any questions, any queries, because like I said, these are my final phase 1 classes of 2024. I won't be offering phase 1 tutoring again until 2025. So I believe that is all I did want to mention in this video. So on that note, I hope this video has been helpful. I hope it's been insightful. I hope it's given people a very interesting introduction and insight into the Rainbow Bridge techniques, especially with practical questions around seated and standing positions and body positions. On that note, 7 ray blessings to all, and please feel free to contact me if there's any questions. Namaste.